Welcome to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. Each week we talk about heart rate variability and how it can be used to improve your overall health and wellness. Please consider the information in this podcast for your informational use and not medical advice. Please see your medical provider to apply any of the strategies outlined in this episode. Heart Rate Variability Podcast is a production of Optimal LLC and Optimal HRV. Check us out at optimalhrv.com. Please enjoy the show. Welcome, friends, to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. I'm Matt Bennett, and I'm back today with friend of the show, author, and we got some exciting news to share. Lieven Van Linden, welcome back to the show. It's been once we get this published out into the world, it'll be 2 years since you've been on the show last. We talked about your book, which unfortunately at the time wasn't in English, so I could get the highlights in that interview, and we'll link that interview in the show notes as well. But Fully Charged is coming to English-speaking audiences very shortly. So, Lieven, congratulations on that. For those that may not have listened to our previous interview, which again, I would suggest we'll put the link in the show notes, folks do. Just love to give an introduction of yourself, and I'll just throw out kind of a follow-up right away about how'd you come to heart rate variability?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Matt, in the show. I'm really pleased to be back and to be talking with a thought leader on the field of HRV. So my name is Lieven, living in Belgium with 2 kids and my lovely wife Laura. And actually, yeah, as you mentioned, author of the book Fully Charged, but my journey towards this book has been quite different. Let's say I have a background as a mechanical engineer. Worked in a corporate environment for about 10 years, working in supply chain operations, let's say optimizing processes, where during an executive MBA, which I did in Belgium, I had this entrepreneurial ideas and spirit. And in that time, I was also doing a lot of ultra races, endurance races, running these crazy marathons all over the world, in Brazil, in Morocco, races of over 200 kilometers. And it was actually from my background as an engineer and these experiences as an endurance racer that I noticed in the corporate environment that there was a lack of awareness on sustainable performance. I noticed that well-being was often perceived as something very fluffy by business leaders, and they were not really engaged to go to these topics and listen about how to breathe differently. And actually, I had experienced otherwise. And having my network in this business area, it was an opportunity for me to introduce more this concept of sustainable performance from a measurable way. And HRV was something which crossed my path and which I never let go since then, and which offers like so many opportunities to get insights in how you function and how you can improve your performance. So and then, yeah, I started my own business, helping leaders to perform sustainably, bringing them awareness first into their energy level using HRV measurements, and then guiding them through immersive experiences, because I'm also an experienced Wim Hof method instructor, ice baths, all these kind of immersive experiences, which takes someone out of the head into the body. That's something which I like to use during retreats with corporate leaders, and then guiding them on a path towards sustainable change, where HRV is always this metric which gives them feedback on how their changes and how their habit changes in real life really impact their nervous system and their energy levels. So it's been quite an interesting journey. And like you mentioned, I published 2 years ago my book Fully Charged in Dutch. So it was released in Belgium and the Netherlands. Was hoping that it was going to be released in English, and found a publisher from the UK, Kogan Page, business book publisher, and it's being released 3rd of July. So yeah, very
Congratulations.
very exciting.
And I'm assuming, just let's get the business part out of the way, that people can find that on Amazon and wherever books are published.
Yeah, you can pre-order it on Amazon, and I think you still get a 30% discount depending when this podcast will be released. But anyway, contact me and I can maybe also give you a discount.
Excellent. Sounds good. We'll put that information in the show notes as well. So for the listeners who hadn't heard our first interview, let's get to some of the core ideas. And you shared with me, I'm still waiting to get my hands on the book. So I'm excited for it to come out here as well. But what are the core ideas behind Fully Charged?
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, as mentioned, my background as an engineer, I was for a long period of time interested in how processes work in a factory environment and in a process environment. And I was always looking for improvement opportunities to reduce waste and improve performance in a process. But I was then, from my corporate background, also being a consultant, having this idea of why can't we apply this in some kind of way to ourselves as humans.
Mhm.
And in Fully Charged, I created some kind of framework which actually is based on this idea of processes and improving processes, knowing that every process has an input and an output. And if you apply that to us as human beings, we have on the output side, we have our results, how we perform, happiness, the behaviors, the things that people see when you meet them, when you talk with them. The process itself is a very complex thing as a human being. I'm not a doctor myself, but so I was looking for something uh, to see, okay, what's the main driver of our output, of our behavior? And
Mhm.
then quite rapidly, I came in contact with the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, which is unconsciously driving a lot of our instinctively behaviors. And looking into this nervous system, I then discovered HRV as being, let's say, the biomarker to measure the health of our nervous system, but not only our nervous system, also being related to our decision-making capabilities, emotional self-regulation. So a whole world opened up to me, discovering that HRV is such a rich biomarker, telling us so much about in which state we are and how well we can adapt to challenges being thrown at us. So in Fully Charged, then I created this framework which then gives you input for your process. So really practical tips how you can improve your nervous system and your self-regulation and the capacity of your nervous system, and how that will influence then your output. That's in a way I try to make it a little bit easier, but that's the framework which I created in Fully Charged.
I love that. And so, and I love that. I love how you're taking your engineering and looking at the human body, with that expertise. Obviously, an organic body is going to be a little bit different than a computer or something like that, even though we reach for those analogies very, very quickly. But I that's what I really appreciate about our last conversation, is that really taking that expertise on the inputs, the outputs, consuming, recharging, increasing, and how heart rate variability, how you position that as a metric of how kind of successful people are in doing those key tasks for performance and health.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe people listening to this podcast, they might be familiar with the concept of agile. It's something which is used in a corporate environment.
Yeah.
IT teams, they work in an agile way, so they work in sprints to deliver a feature of a new product to a client. This methodology in my book, I've applied this methodology to us as a human being. So actually,
Mhm.
at first you can measure how your current state of being, let's say, with HRV, and then you can experiment with some lifestyle changes, habit changes, and see after a couple of weeks, okay, what's the effect on my baseline HRV value, and should I change or adapt? So it's this mindset of continuous improvement that you apply to your own body just by seeing what works and what doesn't work. Of course, not becoming over obsessed with HRV, but just having it as an objective feedback mechanism, alongside, of course, how you feel as a human being.
I love that. And I'm curious, to kind of fill in the blank, because I had to stop myself from getting all the updates on you, because I wanted to do that on the podcast. For those that may have listened to our first interview, but for my curiosity, so you published this book again. I cannot wait to consume it myself. I've got the summaries and everything which you sent me, which was really helpful. I'm curious, with the books I publish, you kind of publish a book. You kind of talk about the book on podcasts. You may integrate the book into some of the consulting, coaching work that you do.
Mm.
And I personally find that my thinking evolves. The book is kind of like a snapshot in time, and then I work beyond the book. And I'm curious,
Mhm.
I know you've got some new chapters to talk about today, but I just love to know kind of like how your thinking and your work's evolved since we last chatted a couple of years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, very interesting question, and also something which I didn't properly reflect upon until today. What I do notice, and I don't see a big difference compared to a couple of years ago. I give keynotes to bigger audiences. I do workshops with leadership teams, and in all those keynotes and workshops, I still see that, let's say, the knowledge about HRV amongst the a general audience, a corporate audience most of the time, or a professional audience of people, it's quite limited.
Mhm.
So when I ask people on, okay, and these are the kind of biomarkers that you can measure, like heart rate, your weight, your calorie intake, your sleep quality, your activities, your track. What do you measure in general? HRV is somewhere still on the bottom of the list, which is
Mhm.
in some way a good sign that there's still a lot of work to do
Yes.
for me
Yep.
to increase the awareness. And you see, there are of course always people who are let's say doing sports, and they already heard of HRV and they see this biomarker, but there are still not many people who are generally aware of what HRV is and the potential power that lies inside this biomarker. So I'm always happy on one hand to see that there is still some awareness that can be boosted with these people. So although I'm yeah working a lot with HRV the last 2 years, I don't see already a big shift
Yeah.
on HRV awareness. Um, yeah.
Which I thought, just my dad, my perception there is, when we talked, it was at a time I was talking to other folks in Europe as well, and I sort of thought that there was going to be this boom in Europe. You all seemed a little bit more ahead of where we were in the States, and it's did, and we talked a little bit about this, just kind of slow and steady
Mhm.
progress
Yeah.
with this, where it still seems a little bit as an early adapter technology, even though when I look out at some of the audiences I speak to, and I'm assuming you do too, I see a lot of Apple Watches on people's wrists. Now, I think you and I would both agree we'd rather those be Garmin's or a different device sometimes,
Yeah.
but we won't get into that. But just it's been interesting that it's happened slower than I would have predicted 2 years ago, especially
Mhm.
after talking to you and some other folks in Europe that just seemed
Yeah.
to be a little bit more ahead of where we were.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. I thought the progress would be faster. Um, but yeah, I think it will still take some time. Although artificial intelligence and
Yeah,
the AI wave and waves which we are going through, and also a lot of corporations are going through, might open a window of opportunity to collect this data. But we all know that yeah, health data to be collected in a professional environment is not always easy. You need
right.
consent of people.
Yeah.
People having trust. It's not that easy as a employer to collect this data. So I don't know whether we will arrive with big audiences all wearing their wearables in a corporate environment. Might be so for some organizations where there's a lot of trust, but it will not be something which will happen overnight.
Yeah. And I think folks like you doing the work that you do, we do a little bit of this as well, is so critical of having the outside person. Because, I thought, sharing HRV data would be a great measure of trust and psychological safety. But even people that I know that work in good organizations, there's no way they're going to share their HRV data, even if they didn't know what HRV data was 5 minutes ago before
Yeah.
I shared. I may have shared this with you the first interview too, is, I find it funny here in the States that if you give people a $10 Starbucks gift card, then they'll share all their medical information with you. So it's there's like this balance that we can strike. And with our horrible healthcare system over here, like, can you get, discounts on healthcare? Can you get a gift card, those sort of things? Like, there's almost a trade-off to get this in
Mhm.
an interesting way. In the states, at least, that I've seen working around this issue.
Yeah, indeed. And I mostly work in Europe, and what I do see there is that people do not often or always immediately openly talk about their health situation or whether they
Yeah.
have had a good night's sleep or a bad night of sleep. But they're doing this HRV measurements, and I don't know whether I mentioned that before, but I work with First Beat as
Yeah.
a tool which does multi-day assessments and then gives you a report. People having this report, their personal report in their hands, quite easily start sharing information with their colleagues because the
Mm.
report, it creates some distance from their personal situation. It feels like, oh, there's red, there's green. Ah, is your report also having red and green? So it creates some distance from their own person, and it opens the conversation. So it's really nice to see how these biometrical results can start a conversation amongst colleagues.
Very cool. I'd also known that you work with a lot of leaders. I'm curious because if you go back, it seems like 20 years ago in some ways, but like summer of 2000, I think a few years back, coming out of COVID, we were closer to COVID at the time. Burnout, at least in the States, was at kind of an all-time high. I'm curious what you're seeing with some of the challenges, the mental health situation in the States. We have our own fun political reality playing out every day in the news. It seems like, when I look at statistics here, there's a lot of people really still struggling. And I'm curious,
Mhm.
as you work, with corporate audiences and leaders, just sort of what are you seeing challenge wise with the mental health of the workforce over in Europe?
Yeah. Yeah, the trend is still increasing if I look at mental health in general. So if you look at the figures in Europe, Belgium, Netherlands, where I work most often, long-term sick leave is still on the rise, uh, where there are multiple reasons why people are ill. Um, so I don't immediately see that there's like a change in the curve and or the direction of the trend curve. Um, and I also don't expect it to change if I see the impact of artificial intelligence on jobs, the
Right.
uncertainty it creates in a lot of industries, the complexity it creates for leaders, the impact on decision taking, and the role between a human and a robot in a process. There's changes happening so fast with so many uncertainties. That it's for leaders really difficult to navigate. And it's often quite lonely at the top, they
Mhm.
say. And yeah, so I think it will not immediately change in the coming years. And slowly I see the discussion around health improving, but also when you talk about cost savings and economical reasons, then I often they say, okay, these health programs, those are the first things which we take off
Right.
our list, and we're not going to do it. So it's not always easy also to sell this kind of interventions, although they are really needed.
Absolutely. All right, so I've delayed my own gratification long enough. Let's talk about those new chapters that you mentioned before we hit record. So, with the new edition, I would love to hear just a little bit of a preview of yeah, what are these new chapters? What's the addition since the last time we chatted?
Yeah. So what I didn't mention was, but you already slightly mentioned is, so in my book I talked then all about the body battery
Yeah.
and practical tips on how to improve your body battery and the energy that you have, giving three energy principles, tips to improve your energy consumption. How can you improve your focus, your productivity, the way how you cope with your energy during the day. I give a lot of tips about increasing your energy level and also on recharging your energy level over the night with sleep, with breaks. Um, in my new book, I added a couple of new chapters. Firstly, on artificial intelligence,
Nice.
because there's no way around this
Yeah.
nowadays. So a little bit talking about, okay, what's the impact of AI? How can you use technology? And because measuring HRV gives you data, what can you do with this data and how can you benefit from using the data that you collect on your own health, because also the role as a coach, it changes, and nowadays everyone just talks with their chatbots. People wear a Garmin of a Whoop. It has an AI coach, and in the morning
Mhm.
it will tell you at what heart rate and intensity you need to train to get your optimal training levels. So what are the pros and the cons of using AI, and what are the pitfalls? So that's a chapter. And then I also put something inside on the female energy level, a very sensitive topic for me as a man to talk about, because yeah, on a hormonal level,
Yeah.
women are completely wired differently. And I will not say to you that I'm an expert in female hormones or energy levels of women, but I try to integrate some insights on how energy levels fluctuate for women during their menstrual cycle of 28 days, because there are big differences between energy levels. And also a little bit, what type of activities can you then best plan during which phase of your 28 day cycle? So that's something which I added. Also something about the change in energy across the lifespan. I'm
Yeah.
over 40 years old and I see that my energy levels are slightly different than when I was in my 20s or 30s. Not necessarily completely negative, but yeah, there are often changes, of course, in recovery when you age. Um, and I also added some things about chronotypes, chrono working on sleep, and then some smaller changes here and there. So these are the, let's say, the main changes. Yeah.
Nice. I'm curious because the AI topic is one that I'm fascinated about because as you know, and as our audience knows, well, if you've never seen it, I'll just share it with folks. The what we at when somebody takes a reading with Optimal, the amount of data that we get is astounding. Like because we're looking at our intervals, we're looking at then you can do all the different metrics, and I believe we can. AI is going to allow us to do a lot more with that data and maybe find some really interesting insights that we didn't have. So I think that I don't know if we even know what questions to ask AI yet.
Mm.
I don't know if AI knows enough to create its own questions of where we can go with this. Though I'm really excited about that future. The interesting part that I'd love to get your kind of feedback on too is I know the health coaches are all the rage, but as somebody who's kind of thought of that from a consumer perspective, I don't hear a whole lot of people loving their health coach. I for everyone that thinks it's valuable, I get about 9 people in different consumer products. So I'm not
Mm.
saying one is bad and one is good, but that are I either get the same feedback every day or it's totally off, and I've just really struggled with how do we get enough input to give the right output. Kind of going back to your model with engineering is, my thing is I don't want to tell somebody in a wheelchair to go for a walk.
Yeah.
And if you take that as your, kind of floor, that we're not going to do that, you just think about the information you have to collect around mental health conditions, around physical conditions, around health conditions to ensure at least you're not doing any harm. This is where I think the health coaches can really get in trouble. And, and I just love to get from put your engineering hat on here with AI and like, where do you see the strengths and weaknesses of, an AI health coach, assuming that we're giving the input of at least a heart rate variability reading?
Yeah. Yeah, there indeed two sides on the coin of AI, and I think there are a lot of positive things. It can help you to detect early signs of fatigue. It can predict maybe periods of higher stress loads. It can give you very personalized recommendations with the input and the information that you have been collecting over a period of time. So it gives you a whole information overload often. That's what I see. A lot of valuable things, but difficult to make it really actionable. Because what I see, and also working with people, I'm both a consumer and I coach people on behavioral change, is that really this aspect for behavioral change and finding the sweet spot of motivating someone to really change their behavior is something where I see that AI is not yet there. You need, in my opinion, a human in front of you which can connect on a human level to translate these insights. As a coach, it's very interesting for me to get all these insights and put them in an AI tool and just get the outcome of a person and the reading. But then going into a conversation with someone and helping this person to understand it for himself and to really let it land and then do something with it, it's something that AI cannot do, in my opinion. You need the human interaction and the frequencies of humans coming together.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where, like, in my field of mental health, like we've long known that outcomes are mostly based on the relationship, and
Mhm.
I think that understanding, that empathy, that somebody might want a coach to kind of gently, I would say, but yell at them to get their butt out of bed and go for a run if they're training for an Ironman or something like that. But that's totally, for a lot of people, that's just going to lead to resistance. And I'm not saying AI can't get there at some point, but I do think and I love hearing that from an engineer, that you also see, the need for you and a coach and a human to be a variable within this system to, I think, offer support that AI can't really do in a way that I
Yeah.
feel is genuine,
Mhm.
at least in my own experience. And I think
Yeah,
that's,
indeed.
yeah,
Indeed,
really,
indeed.
really, yeah,
Yeah, sorry, and indeed, yeah, the human skills of interaction will become increasingly important in a coaching relationship. So I think AI will be able to replace a lot of data crunching, which you were doing before with Excel sheets and I don't know what, and creating these insights and reports. But then the skill of connecting with someone on a human level and yeah, that's something which will become increasingly important.
excellent. Well, I'm curious now that you got the book into English. Your career's continued since we last chatted, and the first book got, the initial publication continued to grow and evolve. I'm just curious. I mean, we're already talking about AI and your additional chapters, and I just, let's be upfront. We're two guys talking about women's health, but I think that insight that you have, if I can use your language, the battery's just different, and I think the
Mhm.
fact that we finally got there as a healthcare system is a really good thing, and probably should have done it 50 years ago, but that's a really awesome insight to have. I'm just kind of curious where you see where are your next steps? Where do you see your work going? What questions do you have as you get this book to a wider audience and continue to evolve in your career and your work as well?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Thanks
are
for
you
the
going to
question.
run any additional like 200-kilometer races? Like, let's do the personal and the professional, because your personal is interesting as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, how I see my own work evolving is I'm increasingly interested um, in in the self-awareness of people, because I think I work often with leaders and leadership, and the impact of a good leader often starts with how much he or she is self-aware, knowing that how they work internally and how they are creating impact and how their behavior creates impact on others. And my entry point is actually often health, and using HRV, and I can connect with leaders because it's HRV, it's measurable. Often they enter from a performance mindset. Oh, still another thing to optimize.
Yeah.
So leaders want to optimize their business, their processes. Oh, now they can optimize themselves. But for me, it's an entry point to increase self-awareness on around how their lifestyle is impacting their own energy levels, but also how they are interacting then with the environment and with others, both on a professional level and a personal level. So also the past years, I've been doing some trainings on NLP, for example. I'm a practitioner on neuro-linguistic programming, on changing behavior of people. I just followed an Enneagram course. It's like MBTI and Insights Discovery, this personality typing, um, to also connect not only the nervous system, not only focus on the nervous system, but also on the connection with the awareness, the cognitive awareness, and the interaction of the two. So I'm more and more seeing myself going towards leadership development as a whole, where the nervous system functioning and self-regulation and increasing your nervous system capacity is the foundation to get started, but where, yeah, the brain also has an important role to play, and that's more where I see myself evolving towards, and I'm calling this leadership capacity, and how you can navigate complexity and uncertainty, and the nervous system is the foundation for this, but there are other things at play. Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm curious too. Let's hit the personal side, because as somebody who thinks a lot about this, I just I'll kind of, you may be running a 200-kilometer race tomorrow, so I won't put that out. But not knowing that you got a couple kids and a wife and a family, I'm assuming that that's probably a little harder to do and fit into your schedule. But I just also just love to talk about, as somebody thinks about this, kind of how your work informs your kind of really just daily personal routine as well, as you've dove into the science and are a role model for other people. I'm just curious, what are some of those challenges you're taking on nowadays, and how do you really approach your own health and wellness with all the knowledge you've gained over the years?
Yeah, yeah, a good question again. I, I there is always a knowing doing gap. You
Mm.
know a lot of stuff, and the more stuff you know, the more you know that you don't know anything at all,
Yeah.
and the more difficult it becomes. So let's say I had this period of doing a lot of ultra races, endurance races, and I was doing them for a reasons that I often did not know which were those reasons. Um, but they were also for me a journey of often of self-discovery through hardship, through challenge, discovering how my body functions, but also finding my own way in life. I'm divorced. I remarried, so I had, of course, like anyone else, my own struggles. I have two kids. These endurance races often brought me conditions where I could challenge myself and see how I could learn from this challenge and what I could learn from myself. That's one thing to mention. Also, I have on the personal side often been in this performance mindset myself, trying to make a career, trying to become the best person unconsciously, being driven by the voice of a father where it was never enough. So a lot of childhood
Mhm.
developmental traumas maybe also being part of my own journey. And these endurance races were the way how to express it in on the outside. So that being said, I'm currently in a phase in my life, and maybe that's where also my midlife crisis comes into play. I don't know, but I noticed that, or I know that okay, these external performance-driven challenges are not giving me any real life answers, and that's from a philosophical point of view, you have all the answers within yourself, and that's the biggest journey to take in life. So. Um, Currently, I'm trying to find ways how to explore, let's say, my inner world, with also through some physical challenges or physical exercises, like for example, free diving.
Mm.
Uh, Free diving, it's a very interesting sport where you have to dive deep on one breath of air. And where the performance comes from relaxation, not from
Mhm.
pushing yourself. Because the more you're relaxed under the water, the better you will be able to dive. So it's a very contradictory, it's a very big contradiction with how I was used to perform in the old days.
Yeah.
But it's learning me a lot about myself, about staying calm under pressure. So a very interesting sport to perform. So I'm now looking for ways how to dive deeper within myself, let's say, and not immediately going to push for another 200-kilometer race. Although I have some races in mind, but let's see, let's see.
Well, free diving is interesting because it is, it's not something I think a typical person would just find themselves like. It's not pickleball, it's not tennis. It is as far as I understand, the having listened, because in our space, the performance space, there's a lot to learn from free diving, I found, and a lot of potential danger there, even though I know you try to mitigate that as much as possible. So it's interesting that you're still pushing yourself beyond those barriers, but bringing a little bit more of the mental psychological side
Yeah,
to your I, extreme-ish activities.
yeah, and for whilst for example when I was running an ultra in the desert, I could easily shut myself off from my own body, and I could just keep on pushing, and it could help me to be successful in the race. But for freediving, it doesn't work. You need to have self-awareness around your body. You need to be able to listen to your body, and so it's a whole different way of approaching physical exercise. And from all the things that I'm also writing about in my book about sleep, about movement, about meditation, all these different practices, there is one practice which has learned me the most, and that's breath work. And yeah, I'm a Wim Hof instructor, so there are breathing methods involved in Wim Hof. I'm working with coherence breathing. There's so many flavors on breath work, and yeah, one thing you need to practice for freediving is yeah, learning to regulate yourself with your breath, and to learn the essence of breathing and not breathing. So yeah, it's a beautiful practice, also to then learn others about.
Very cool. Well, my friend, it is always a great pleasure to talk to you. Congratulations on the book again, fully charged. You said publication date was July 3rd, right?
Yeah,
In the US. So we'll put some links in the show notes, and just to help get the word out there. I can't wait to read it. So congratulations, and I hope, maybe 2 years from now. It was funny. I remember last time we were talking during the Euro soccer tournament, and now I don't know. I didn't want to bring up the World Cup too much because I did watch your team play, and I'm not going to get too excited about the U.S. yet.
No.
But when this probably comes out, people will know a lot more about the results. But I'm not going to start talking trash yet. But my friend, it is so good to see you. Congratulations. And I want you to write another book so I can interview you again about how you think about this. And I love how you apply it to your own life. So thank you very much for coming back on the show, and the best of luck with the English publication.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It was my
All
pleasure.
right. As always, you can find show notes. Again, these are very important show notes, so you can find those probably where you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, and you can find those at optimalhrv.com. Thank you so much, and we will see you soon.